Now,
And we are live.
Yo.
welcome everybody. Jeez, it's been a
Been
long time.
while.
Yeah. Welcome, guys. Good to see you after such a long
Since the
time.
last time we
Yeah.
spoke, Andreas moved house. Andrew decides to move countries. Screw you.
Andreas gotten COVID and almost didn't make it.
Yeah, sis, it
But
was
we've had some-
hectic.
we've had some-
Are you recovered now?
Yeah, I still have the pneumonia in the lungs. I still have just got to be careful. But it's probably in all my, being all my 40 years on this earth, it's probably the worst 2 weeks I've ever encountered. It was just something, I never expected for me that it would hit me that hard. Me being fit, healthy, train, active, eat well. You know what I'm saying? So you just never know how this virus is going to tackle you.
Yeah, you're quite bad.
Yeah, I got double pneumonia, and then there was a case where I had a blood clot. In the beginning,
Ladies and gents, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Alan is joining the studio now. We've just been waiting for him and wasting time. And Andrew is here. I'm going to add Alan to the stream. Alan Aragon, welcome.
What's going on, guys? What's up? What's
Hey.
up?
How are you?
Alan, good to see you, man. It's nice to chat to you up front. Well, through technology. I wish we could chat to him up live and personal. You know what I'm saying? It would even been better. But this is the best we can get for now, which is an honor to have you on the show, man. And just Craig, go ahead and introduce.
I'm super stoked to actually talk to you after knowing you since 2010 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following you. I think, back in 2000, I think, back when on the forums there, when you and Lau were doing your thing, and that's when I started following, and I said, this guy knows his stuff, man. And that's when I started getting into the fitness world and started studying and educating myself. And then you've been one of my mentors from I am where I am today because you're one of the reasons. So I thank you for everything you do and for everything that you have done in the past for the fitness world. You've really come across the globe and shined the bright light to everybody. And we're honored to have you, and it's very special to me.
Bro, it's an honor right back, man. You guys are a group of legends yourselves. I remember homie in the top right being a guest, or actually in Elite Fitness with Mountain Dog et al. Really hilarious conversation that I saw with you. I think it was you with Dave Tate, perhaps.
Yeah.
You guys
His
bulking diet.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the Hershey's bar every hour and stuff. That one.
That was one of my favorite vids of all time, and I've always directed people to that video when they're wondering how to gain weight. So it was hilarious.
If you see now Andrew Hudson eats, you won't have a problem gaining weight.
Dude, bro's legs are like this anyway. So
what I'd like to do is just, if you don't mind, we'll just give you a formal introduction to the South African audience. Obviously, our peers know who you are, but a lot of our clients don't. They don't follow the research as much as we do.
Okay, yeah, go for it. I'm going to open this window a little bit.
And what they don't know is you've played a massive role in my own coaching philosophies over the years. Because I've learned so much from yourself, your research, Brad, Eric Helms, all of it has shaped, I think, myself, Andrew. I can probably speak for Steph as well. But I'd like to introduce him, yourself, and just give a little bit of a rundown of who you are, so people know who they're talking to.
Okay. So Alan certainly needs no introduction in our tribe. But for everyone else who is not a gym bunny or not a diet fundi, Alan is a nutrition researcher. Some would say the nutrition researcher. He's coached WWE superstars, Grand Slam tennis people, NBA basketball teams like the Pistons and LA Lakers, Olympic athletes, figure athletes, bodybuilders, celebs. And also, I mean, the first time I became aware of Alan was when him and Lane were on the bodybuilding forums talking to people about if it fits your macros, like that little acronym that became a whole trend. Yeah, so the first book that I bought of Alan's was it was a men's health book. What was it called, Craig? I think it's still in our library.
Yeah, we've still got it. The Men's Health Lean Muscle Diet.
That's it.
That was it.
You all know I hate that title. I hate it. I thought that was the stupidest name of a book I've ever heard of, and I complained to Lou about it. I'm like, Lou, is this the effing name of our book? Okay, is there anything we can do about this? And Lou's like, well, it was Rodale who named the book, and without and Rodale is basically telling us to either take the title, we're giving you full control over the content, or you can go ahead and take a walk. And I was like, oh crap. Well, we'll take that shitty title.
Lou Schiller. I haven't heard from him in a while. He's been under the radar.
Yeah. Everybody kind of went under the damn radar, but I had to interrupt. I had to rudely interrupt that. So yeah, go for it. Go for it. Make me seem better than I actually am. Go ahead. Continue.
And then I think all of us are subscribers to the Aragon Research Review. Like it's been going since 2008, I think. And every month, what Alan does, Alan and his team of experts, is distill the latest research into understandable publication for us as practitioners to understand and interpret and use in our practices. So, I mean, he's an absolute legend in our field.
I mean, we can all call ourselves evidence-based practitioners and coaches, but we're not scientists. We're not researchers, and we haven't published papers either.
No.
So we often rely on people like Alan, Brad, Eric, and the like to interpret that research for us and to help us understand it better on their level, which in turn helps our clients and get the best information for them and the most honest information for them.
Is there anything you want to add to our little biography of yours, Alan?
Oh gosh, no, you guys covered it well. I really appreciate that acknowledgement, and it's been a very, very long road. So because I started in the industry at the age of 20, which was in 1992. So it's been 29 years in the industry, and I've been able to observe a lot of different changes and a lot of things evolve. And I had already been in the industry for 10 years before I hopped on the internet and got on social media and started arguing with people online. So yeah, man, it's been a really long road, and it's some really nice vindication to hear the acknowledgement. So I really thank you guys, and I appreciate it. And I want to say hello to everybody tuning in as well. You guys have this live on Facebook or something like that?
Yeah, they're all coming on live now.
Facebook, YouTube.
Cool. So what's up, everybody? What's up, everyone in the audience?
They're all saying hello in the messages there.
Cool.
Okay.
I think what we first want to chat about is your recent book, the Protein Book. Very interesting book, very comprehensive. And I will fall in with the first question just to get the conversation starting.
Sure.
Most of our audience, just to kind of narrow it down a little bit as well, because we know, the usual answer is, it depends. But for most of our audience is going to be bodybuilders, people who are either natural bodybuilders or enhanced bodybuilders. What would a protein recommendation be off season? What type of grams per kilogram would a person have to look at to build muscle?
Surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, a good target is a gram per pound. A good target that kind of covers it all. I mean, it shoots right in the right ballpark, and there will be some individuals who are not where they want to be body weight wise. They may be very far off from it in terms of being either underweight or overweight. So in those cases, you would set protein at in grams per pound, target body weight instead of actual body weight if you're not where you want to be. So that's kind of the easy, simple target, is the good old gram per pound target. And if you want to sort of nitpick, there have been very few. It's very rare to have issues overdoing protein. Some people have trouble if you go over, let's say, 3 grams per kilogram, or over somewhere between 3 and 4 grams per kilogram of body weight. Some people feel that that's a little bit too high to sustain for a period of time, even for a particular training phase or a seasonal phase. So much above 3 and certainly above 4, people can't appear to sustain it. But there's not a whole lot of downside to that, going that high. Got to say, the only thing might be a prohibitive amount of satiety, where you find trouble consuming the rest of your calories and macros if you start heading far above 3 and towards 4 grams per kilo.
Or your budget.
I think there was a study about Jose Antonio, I think 2014, where he did a 4.4 grams per kilo. I think it was in resistance trained individuals. I don't remember. I still have that paper somewhere in my folder. That showed, I don't remember exactly what it showed, but I think that was the highest study. Was it 4.4 grams per kilo? If my memory serves me correct.
Yes. Yeah. It was, I believe it was an 8-week study, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And they compared 4.4 grams per kilo, so 2 grams per pound for the imperial audience. And they sustained it for 8 weeks. And interestingly, all they did was just they added 800 calories of protein on top of the maintenance requirements for these subjects. And that amount of protein had an interesting effect on their eating behavior, because apparently it drove down the intake of the rest of the diet, because they didn't gain any body weight, even though they sustained this 800 calorie surplus made of protein. So it's an interesting phenomenon, like the disappearing protein thing. We can speculate that they either misreported that protein, because interestingly, across the macronutrients, carbohydrates tend to get underreported. While you tell people to increase protein, that will tend to get overreported. And so there could have been old-fashioned misreporting going on with that study, or there could have been an increase in thermogenesis through the various pathways that you can increase energy expenditure, and those pathways being either at the resting level or at the active level of metabolism. And I talked to Joey Antonio about the study, and he relayed to me that this is stuff that wasn't published in the paper, but he said that the subjects generally had a very hard time maintaining the 4.4 grams per kilogram of body weight intake. And he said that a lot of the subjects complained about sleeping or sweating while sleeping. So just waking up in a puddle of sweat. So there was possibly some energy expenditure ramp up at the resting level when you consume that much protein. So, and it's funny because when you talk about sleep sweats, people talk about meat sweats when you go to, for example, a Brazilian barbecue or something like that, and you're just eating just pounds of meat. It's the meat sweats thing. So consuming that much protein towards the 4 grams per kilo is potentially not very conducive to maintaining a hypercaloric state for the off season.
I think it also comes to that one study where it was done on protein overfeeding. I think you touched up on it quite a while ago. On that, was it 1,000 calories of overeating protein?
This was well, you could be thinking about the Liebel study where it was just 1,000 calories a day in general.
Yes. Protein, that's a study. That's correct.
Yeah. But the Antonio study was close enough, because that's about 800 calories above maintenance, but all protein, and it seemingly just sort of disappeared into thin air.
Yeah. Magic of protein.
Yeah, that's right.
But but it makes sense as you say it now. I mean, in the off season, you want to limit. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What I was trying to say.
So
In the off season, it's like you want to be able to eat at a
more
certain
carbs, more fats,
Yeah.
delay that post-absorption stage as much as possible.
Yeah.
And as you say, the protein's really, really filling and really satisfying, and satiety levels quite high, which is the thing you don't want when you're trying to get 5,000 or 6,000 calories in.
Sure. And a lot of times, athletes, just as a population, they have a higher level of non-exercise activity than just the average couch potato. Like they're a lot more hyperkinetic, they're a lot more twitchy, they're a lot more fidgety. They just walk 10% faster from one side of the house to the other, and they just have a higher NEAT level, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis level, and so with this population, it is a little bit harder to create and maintain a caloric surplus that doesn't get swallowed up by activity, whether it's at a subconscious level or whether it's at a purposeful level of training.
Yeah, Craig,
you do also get those, you get those guys that in the off season, they just tend to really get fat really easily.
Yeah.
That could possibly be an application for something like that, with just loading them up on more protein to drive that satiety.
Oh, definitely. It always works.
Or even that exit plan as you come out of a competition stage. Get the protein up to try and prevent them from binging and rebounding. Because I generally, post-comp, I bring people straight up to maintenance or slightly modified maintenance. I don't do the reverse dieting thing. And then often that can help offset that oncoming binge that can possibly happen.
That's an excellent tactic. I never actually thought of that. But controlling the post-contest binge with keeping it mainly protein. That's pretty brilliant, man. You could write an ebook on that one.
Well, you mentioned something interesting in the beginning, and it's actually a technique that I've used after listening to you talk about it once. When I'm dealing with lifestyle-based clients, often what I do is set their calorie target to where their goal is, as long as that goal is not 50 kilos. But if it's in 10 or 15 kilo chunks, I usually set, okay, you weigh 120 kilos. Our first goal is 110 or 105. And I'll aim their calories to live at, or whatever the maintenance calories are for 100 or 105 kilo individual, until they eventually reach that point. And then I go down to 90 and then 80 and so on. And what I felt is it teaches them, it's hard to live lean. So basically, during the process of dieting down, they've learned to actually maintain that weight loss long term. And it's been one of the most useful tactics, especially with lifestyle clients. I don't know if you still subscribe to that belief these days, but with certain clients, I found it to be quite effective.
Well, I definitely agree with now that's definitely a valid thing, and I've observed that as well. And I also was pleased to hear that you don't do the reverse dieting thing, at least in the how it was initially presented, where you add like 5 to 10 grams of carbon fat per week for the next like 3 months, and it's like, holy crap, get this competitor out of their starvation ASAP.
What I do is that I usually work out their maintenance of what I realized before prep, because generally I've been working with them a while. And then I come down maybe 150 to 200 calories for whatever possible adaptations would have happened on a BMR level. I think by encouraging the more food and etc., their needs going to go up anyway. I don't use a lot of cardio in prep, so I don't really need to compensate for the lack of, all of a sudden we don't have 2 hours of cardio in our training per day. I don't need to make up for that.
That's awesome.
That's kind of how my exit plan works.
No, I love it. I love the idea of minimum effective dose for a lot of things, especially especially with training. Minimum effective dose with nutrition, it can be a little bit different, because you kind of want to maximize the amount of calories that people can consume and still make progress. But it's like with training, you don't want to maximize the amount of volume and cardio they can possibly do without passing out, So
that is very interesting, because I think often people that do what we do, I'm speaking about people who like to hang around in the gym, want to do as much as they possibly can. They want to walk out of there feeling that they are almost dead. And it's a difficult thing to make a person understand that, if you do that now, where are you going to next? Like, are you going to do 60 sets a week? Like, there's just not enough time for that, so
absolutely.
How do you manage?
Also, I mean, as you age, like, you have to realize, like, me personally anyway, I'll take a much more moderate approach to my dosing as far as training goes now, because I want to carry on doing this until I'm really old. It's something I enjoy. And if you're constantly redlining everything all the time, your risk for injury goes up. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can accumulate, and at the end of the day, the result's not a good one.
But Andrew, weren't you consuming a crazy amount of protein when you were training with Hanny Rambod? You could like 400 grams a day. Was it something like absurd?
Yeah, it was really high, too high.
Yeah, I think it was like crazy amounts.
8 meals a day of 350 grams.
Nitrogen, you were getting there, boy.
But you're also 145 kilos.
Yeah.
It's relative, I suppose.
Man, yeah, that's awesome, man. That's cool that you worked with Hani. I mean, gosh, the guy's resume speaks for itself, so that's cool.
Yeah, sure. And then I know there's a time and place where a higher protein is more beneficial. Older population, certain vegetarian, vegans. Can you maybe just touch up on vegan, vegetarian protein, and what's the suggested protocol for that type of for those people?
Yeah, man, it depends really on the goal, on the population and the goal, because general population, people who just want to be generally fit, look good at the apartment complex pool, as Paul Carter has put it. It doesn't really totally matter if somebody's avoiding animal sources. But if you're talking about pushing the limits of growth, if you're talking about pushing the limits of either rates of growth or growth ceilings, then you're at a compromise if you go strict plant-based. Even if you try to fill in all the gaps with the key amino acids that might be missing, with the EAAs and BCAAs and all the special stuff, the stuff missing in plant-based diets, carnitine, creatine, those types of things, even collagen. You're still not necessarily going to max out your potential as you would if you were omnivorous. Now there's not a lot of motivation for research money to go into this area of study, because who really cares about pushing the limits? We're looking at the general population and what they can maintain, and we're looking at clinical populations and whatnot. But just adding together the bits and pieces of evidence and seeing the acute anabolic responses of various proteins. Yeah, thus far you're not going to beat animal protein by and large. And there are some anomalous findings. There's this weird anomalous finding where pea protein was superior to whey protein to a very tiny degree for improving muscle thickness over a period of a couple months or 2 or 3 months. That is kind of a one-hit wonder of a finding in the literature. And we have to view those kind of things with skepticism until it's replicated, because I'm not ready to tell everybody to just put down their animal protein and just start eating pea protein. So it remains to be seen what's up with that. But generally speaking, when you look at all the lines of evidence, the short-term evidence, the long-term, the longitudinal evidence, and you look at just the physiology of the matter, animal proteins are superior as a group over plant proteins for muscle anabolism. And I want to mention also that there was a study that was done where both groups consumed 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, which in the general population is a sufficient amount of protein to max out adaptations to resistance training. So both groups were resistance training, and one group was vegan and one group was omnivorous. And there were no differences over the course of the trial in terms of muscle growth, in terms of body composition change, etc. And so it was kind of a big win for the camp that would be in favor of promoting strictly vegan and plant-based. But this wasn't a trained population. They're untrained, straight off the couch, straight up, pull them off the street, put them in the study. And it doesn't tell us a whole lot about pushing the envelope. So I think that for moderate goals in the general population, you can get away with a strictly plant-based. But if you want to push the limits of muscle growth, then I am highly skeptical that you can do that without animal proteins.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look at from the amino acids are a little different from biological value. I mean, the efficiency from animal proteins to vegetarian proteins are a lot more. So if you look at it from that perspective, it just makes it's a no-brainer. I suppose you can get away with mixing some rice and beans and getting a full complete amino acid profile with different array of foods. But like you said, animal proteins are far more superior, and the research shows it.
Yeah, generally speaking, it's about digestibility and availability of the nutrients, and then you have to look at what are the functional consequences of these comparisons. And so there's a lot of gray area here, but yeah, if there's a lot on the line, if there's very high stakes for who places where, you're not really going to want to take those risks with removing all animal proteins from the diet. But for regular folks, it's a viable option.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Alan, peri-workout. How would a bodybuilder, female and male, structure protein intake? Is it important to take it before? Is it important to take it after? How would one build that?
I suppose we'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say they woke up in the morning and they read 9-10 hour fast since their last meal.
Yeah, I'm a proponent of not training in a completely fasted state. So if somebody trains first thing in the morning and they don't have much time to get in pre-workout nutrition, protein at least, or protein and carbs, then I think that an intra-workout protein and or amino acid and carb combination would help from just the standpoint of making those nutrients available at that key time point, as well as just providing a default hydration, motivation to hydrate through the session, and also kind of covering all of your bases for recovery and growth. So that's if somebody is like a first thing in the morning type of deal. Yeah. And another stipulation there is if the training session is particularly rigorous, like with some folks, they've got these 30 to 45 minute training sessions that may involve like a single small body part. It might not involve a whole lot of stamina or endurance element or being able to maintain a certain level of effort towards the end of the workout because you haven't put forth, depleted yourself much at all through the entire course of the workout. That's on one end. Then you have other folks who will bust ass for 90 minutes or more in a session. And so it's the latter group who would benefit a bit more from intra-workout intake of protein and carbs. Now we have a whole separate group here who trains in like the late morning or mid-afternoon or late afternoon, and they've had a chance to have, a banger of a mixed meal, a substantial amount of protein, let's say like 30, 40, 50 grams of protein, and then as much carbohydrate or so. And then they're heading into the workout No, when you consume that much, when you, for example, if you consume 40 grams of protein, 45 grams of protein, those amino acid levels are going to peak in the blood about 60 minutes later than you've ingested the protein. And this is if you've ingested the protein, a fast absorbing source, all by itself. So this was a study by Power and colleagues in 2009, where they looked at just a couple scoops of whey protein. How long does it take for amino acids to become just maximally available in circulation? It takes about 45 minutes. And so even if you've had this mixed meal at even up to an hour, 2 hours pre-workout, you still won't be done completely digesting and absorbing it, even by the end of the typical length workout. So in a lot of cases, your pre-workout meal functions as an intra-workout intake because of the time course of digestion and absorption. So, you have those different scenarios for where peri-workout nutrition may or may not matter. But, we were asked, when I wrote this paper called Nutrient Timing Revisited, this was in 2013. Yeah, I wrote it with my friend St. Bradley Schoenfeld. We were tasked to write this paper that looked at the literature examining this narrow post-exercise window of opportunity. And you guys are aware of the legend and lore behind the magic hour post-workout. And so at 2013, by then, there was about 7 years worth of studies that kind of questioned the whole magic of the post-workout period. And we wrote a paper compiling these studies and saying, hey, look, it doesn't look like the post-exercise period, like 30 to 60 minutes post-exercise, is anything particularly special if people are consuming multiple protein feedings a day and enough total protein by the end of the day, because they're always in somewhat of the fed state throughout the course of the day. And so all of the research that looked at all of the research that reported a positive effect of consuming protein post-exercise basically looked at it in subjects that didn't consume anything at all and trained in an overnight fast and either consumed these nutrients or did not consume them. And so obviously there's going to be an advantage of the post-exercise feeding when you don't have any surrounding availability of amino acids. And so my colleagues and I, what we did was we did a meta-analysis of all of these studies, and we found that, you've got more or less an anabolic garage door of time frame to get these nutrients in. And it makes sense anyway, because when you consume a meal, the anabolic effect of the meal lasts anywhere from like 3 to 6 hours, depending on the size of the meal. So when I say anabolic effect, I mean availability of amino acids in the blood. And so if you look at the peri-workout period as the time point between the pre-exercise protein feeding and the post-exercise protein feeding, and somewhere's in between there's going to be like 5, 3, 2 hours, or however closely you consume your pre and post-exercise meal. That time frame between that's the peri-exercise period. We found that looking at the literature, you can stretch that peri-exercise period to as far as 5-6 hours with your exercise bout being somewhere in between there. Yeah. And you still get a maximal anabolic effect just because the time course of a meal and nutrients in the blood is it's slower and longer than we give it credit for, especially if it's a mixed macronutrient meal. And so that's kind of the deal with the peri-exercise period. But I will say, and I will give it, like some people, they really swear by an intra-workout solution. They really swear by their intra-workout shake. And I think that's almost never a bad idea for people training 90 minutes or more. And it also kind of ignites sort of these psychogenic motivating faculties, just sort of like neurally, while people are training, they're kind of in a good mood from this good tasting, sweet tasting drink that's hydrating them and pumping them up. And I'm not going to hate on intra is basically what I'm saying. Even though if somebody has a big ass pre-workout meal, like freaking 50 grams of protein, 80 grams of carbs pre-workout, but they still insist on having that intra. Well, that intra is providing them with a certain degree of hydration and a certain degree of lighting up their central nervous system, perhaps, and making them push harder through the training bout. So,
sure.
What I usually do is, I train first thing in the morning, and obviously very different adaptation response to, say, Andrea or Steph and them, just a wannabe triathlete. So what I try to do is I eat probably about 50, 60% of my daily calories before bed. It's just happened like that. And then my training sessions are usually about 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. And then what I'll use is probably EAAs, which are pre-digested with some sort of fast-acting carbohydrate. And then I'll sip that every 15 minutes during my sessions, because they're usually about 2 hours or so. And that's just consistent, aerobic capacity, which is probably very different to an hour, whatever.
That's the ideal setup to demand intra workout nutrient intake. So I would agree you're doing the right thing there.
But if we take it from a big picture perspective, for the general pop and the average guy wanting to look good in the pool, doesn't really make a huge difference. If we look at it from the bigger broad base, as long as you're just hitting your daily calories and protein, that's what basically matters the most. Unless you're a competitive athlete, bodybuilder, that 1 to 2% difference on nutrient timing can matter. And especially like you said, for people that are training longer than 90 minutes plus, especially endurance athletes, those hold more benefits. But then when it comes to that threshold of the optimal anabolic response, there's if we look at it, it's about 1.7 grams of 3.5 grams of leucine. Am I right? I think over and above that, you're not really getting you're not stimulating a much higher response, muscle protein synthetic response. So what is your take on the leucine threshold, Alan? And especially for vegans, obviously, if vegan protein is a bit lower in leucine. Can you touch up maybe on that for viewers just to understand that a bit better?
Yeah, sure. The maximizing muscle protein synthesis involves getting enough essential amino acids in a sitting. And the most important amino acid, as far as we know, driving the anabolic response would be leucine. But leucine doesn't necessarily work on its own. You need the full range of the rest of the essential amino acids to get a maximal anabolic response. But just kind of judging from animal protein doses and just sort of observing what maxes out MPS, it appears that in young subjects, somewhere between 20 to 25 grams of protein maxes out MPS if it's a low volume of resistance exercise that you're looking at. Now, a little bit more recently, within the past few years, this belief that 20 to 25 grams, that kind of got blown out of the water because they finally subjected the participants to a higher volume training bout and saw that 40 grams of protein elicited a higher level of muscle protein synthesis than 20 grams of protein. This is McNaughton and colleagues within the past few years. And so we can't really look at the 2-ish grams of leucine, 1.5 to 2 grams of leucine being sort of the threshold. We're more looking at it like, possibly at least 3 and maybe even up to 4 or 5 in the older population. And so a very recent publication within the past couple of years, actually within the past year potentially, by Park and colleagues, where they looked at older subjects and they compared 35 grams of protein with 70 grams of protein within a mixed meal. So it was beef protein, and they measured whole body protein synthesis, and they measured muscle protein synthesis. And muscle protein synthesis was higher with the 70 gram dose than with the 35 gram dose. And this is the first time we've seen this 35 grams get beat out by 70. So somewhere between 35 grams and 70 grams of protein could possibly be the maximal MPS effect in older subjects consuming a mixed meal. But then we have a little wrinkle here, because this was in the resting state. This wasn't in the post-trained state, because resistance training, it potentiates or sensitizes muscle to muscle protein synthesis, or the anabolic effect of feeding protein, especially. So it's really hard to say. Going back to your question, like 1.5 grams of leucine for the threshold, 2 grams of leucine for the threshold. I don't know. It could be higher than that for older folks.
Yeah.
Especially.
But then you still need the rest of them as well, all the other amino acids.
It was also that, I think it was that study with 2016 Kim, where they did that 70 gram protein in a meal was superior to the 40 grams of protein in a meal. But the obviously muscle protein synthesis was maximized at 40 grams within a meal, but 70 grams created a higher result whole protein balance throughout the day. I think was that the study you were referring to?
That I know which study you're talking about. You're talking about Kim and colleagues. This latest one is Park and colleagues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It just came out within the past year, and so that sort of changes our idea of what the single meal limit might be for anabolic effect. So I see a question put up here by
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it leads quite on to what you and Andrea and Andrew were discussing now. This is one of our good clients, one of Steph's good clients, a doctor himself, a surgeon. He's basically asking, with regard to protein feedings, is reaching a total protein intake, daily protein intake of, say, 200 grams a day, more important than having that in specific large meals? So, like for me, my understanding of the research is four large meals a day will optimize hypertrophy. Mm-hmm. I think what he's alluding to, he doesn't have the time in his type of work where he can sit down for a big meal 4 times a day. You know, he's a surgeon working in a really busy hospital. Mm-hmm. And having to just grab little meals all the time of 10 grams protein here, 15 grams protein there. So would this have a negative effect? I'd imagine possibly on the leucine response per meal. And would the refractory period or lack thereof be a negative?
Okay, these are all great questions. It would help to know what his goals are, you know.
He's a big bodybuilding lad, even though he's a pediatric surgeon. Yeah.
I was going to say, man, he could be a surgeon plus a freaking competitor, right? And he is. Heavens, yeah, he is.
Big guy, a bit of an Arnold Schwarzenegger lookalike.
Okay. If he was your run-of-the-mill surgeon, I would have immediately said, you know what? There's so much research comparing so many different protein distributions through the day, evenly spread versus skewed towards one meal, you know, multiple meals versus very few meals, large meals. And they, you know, God, they just study after study, they find like no damn difference. But, you know, this person you're describing, he sounds to me like somebody who's out of the norm, somebody who's athletic, and somebody who's toward that upper percentile of people who want to push the envelope. So I would have to say, he would be compromising his muscle growth if all he could do was get those 200 grams of protein in 2 meals that had 100 grams of protein. As far as we know, as far as the evidence goes today, the maximal amount of protein per meal that would max out muscle protein synthesis. Somewhere between 0.4 to 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. If you want to roll the dice with higher doses than that and see if you can get away with a couple of 100-gram bangers a day, I would say in theory, you wouldn't be optimizing or pushing growth. But, you know, with somebody like him, he might be able to at least maintain what he's got. He might be able to maintain it. But growth, I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I think how he spaced it out is just he's basically taking his whole day's food and eating it as snacks for 18 hours of the day instead of 2 meals or 3 big meals.
Oh, okay. So he's doing the okay. Got it.
And that's why I was worried about not worried, but the refractory period in between. How much that constitutes, because obviously a common practice I've noticed locally is branched chain amino acid pulsing, you know, in between meals, which I don't do, but it is a common practice. Yeah. Did I lead into a question? Probably.
But is he also not talking about the muscle protein?
Am I the only one who missed it?
Sorry, no. I was just making a comparison between kind of people that are eating like tons of small meals, like every day he's just snacking all day, which would be similar to people who eat their meals and then do protein pulsing in between, or branched chain amino acid pulsing in between.
Okay. I hear you.
Which kind of nullifies that refractory period. And
Right.
Is that to growth?
Right. So if he is doing this sort of micro pulsing type of pattern, per the evidence, as long as one or two, in his case, I want to say two, a minimum of 2 of his meals are a maximally anabolic dose, meaning at least a minimum of 2 of his meals hit the 0.4 to 0.6 grams per kilogram threshold, then he'll be able to make decent progress. It's just that when we look at studies where all it is just microdosing through the day and none of the meals hit a certain threshold of just a singular large dose, then those conditions tend to not perform as well anabolically to conditions where there's at least one large dose of protein. And admittedly, the research that this theory is based on is not on the population of this gentleman that we're talking about now. It typically has been in middle-aged and older adults. So, for example, this is a study by Arnold and colleagues done in the early 2000s, where they compared a spread of four even dosings of protein amounting to a total of 1.7 grams per kilo. I think it was of fat-free mass. Could have been total body mass. The details are escaping me, but it was a sufficient amount of protein for that population, either spread evenly over 4 meals or concentrated 80% of that in 1 meal a day and just sort of traces of it elsewhere. And interestingly, it was the skewed pattern that did better for retaining markers of muscle. So they retain nitrogen better in the pattern that had at least one dose that was a banger of a dose that hit this so-called threshold compared to 4 evenly spread doses. So it was, when you look at the literature and you try to make sense and you try to issue these evidence-based recommendations, it's very hard to apply them to athletic and advanced bodybuilding type athletes because this is such an understudied population. So what might work for the elderly and the middle-aged general population might not apply to this gentleman. So I would default to just playing it on the safe side and saying, you know, if you want to optimize, make sure you get at least man, I want to even up at least 2 to 3 meals where you're consuming 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, and then the rest you can micro dose through if that makes it easier for you.
I think you also got to look at the overall, like between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. I think a lot of people get in total net overall protein balance. I think a lot of people get confused about that. Alan, do you want to maybe just explain the difference and how that occurs, in different pathways that people think that you're consuming protein that's just going to muscle, but protein doesn't just only go to muscle. There's so many pathways and certain other pieces of the puzzle. So I'll rather let you explain that, the Jedi himself.
Okay, so in the beginning, this is probably would have helped to say this, cover this in the beginning, but you can look at protein intake as in a hierarchy of importance, with the total amount by the end of the day being the top tier of importance. And then the second level of importance would be, how you distribute that, how you distribute those doses through the day. That's secondary importance. So this is kind of where we quibble over the details and the hypothetical stuff. But if you get the total by the end of the day, the difference between somebody who consumes it 3 times a day versus 6 meals a day, that's debatable. How much difference that's going to make. So if we're looking at how protein doses affect anabolism, then we look at things in terms of, well, how does muscle growth happen? Well, muscle growth is the result of a higher amount of muscle protein synthesis than muscle protein breakdown over the course of the day, the week, the month, etc. And so if you can exceed your muscle protein breakdown with protein synthesis on a consistent basis, then you're going to end up growing muscle. You mentioned that, we talk about muscle protein synthesis a lot, but we don't really talk about muscle protein breakdown much. But the prevention of muscle protein breakdown is a part of the equation. It's debatable how significant that part of the equation is. There's some reports out of Morton's lab, or at least he wrote a review on it, showing that muscle protein synthesis happens at many times the rate of muscle protein breakdown in the fed state. And so muscle protein breakdown is an element of the equation that we just kind of sweep under the rug, because there's this assumption that it's not a major contributor to net muscle growth. So, okay, we'll put that whole conversation aside for a second. There's 2 camps in the research world who have a disagreement on maximal muscle anabolism per protein dose. So one group is Stu Phillips and Jorn Tromelin and those bros who would insist that muscle protein synthesis is kind of the end-all measure of what really matters as far as growth.
I just want to interrupt you. Are we talking whole body muscle protein synthesis, or at the skeletal muscle tissue?
At the skeletal muscle level.
Because people get confused, because when you delve in a bit more, we're looking at because other tissues, organs, and stuff like that. That's whole protein body synthesis, which people get confused and they're like, oh, okay, I just thought it was muscle. So I just want to, because I've gotten a lot of questions from this to explain to people, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, And the way you've got a nice level at explaining to people and in a simple form. Please just if you can just touch on that as well.
Oh yeah,
I think a lot of people do that. I know Stu Phillips also. I think his paper touches up on that. One of his papers, I don't remember, on the whole muscle protein synthesis and skeletal muscle tissue.
Right. No, that's a good point. So there's a difference between when there's just an important distinction that we have to make here. There's muscle protein synthesis, and then there's whole body protein synthesis. So muscle tissue is not the only kind of lean tissue in the body that uses protein. So Stu's camp and Jorn Trommel and Stu Phillips, they have a very strong focus on muscle protein synthesis being somewhat of the end all indicator of the anabolic response. And then you've got Robert Wolf's camp saying I think we're missing the big picture here, because you've got whole body protein synthesis that we need to look at, not just muscle protein synthesis. And so Stu's camp would say, you know what, we just have to look at muscle protein synthesis, because who cares about what other lean tissues take up protein? And that's mainly going to be the visceral organs, the gut, the splanchnic bed. They'll take up amino acids, but we're looking at growing muscle. So whole body protein synthesis is somewhat of a misleading marker for growth, especially muscle growth. But then Wolf's camp would come back and say, okay, well, these amino acids are taken up by the gut and not the muscle, but in specific times of need, the gut could hypothetically release these amino acids and make them available to the muscles. And so there's that kind of back and forth going on, where Wolf's camp says, we got to look at whole body protein synthesis. And then you got Stu's camp saying, it's about muscle protein synthesis, So yeah, even in the ivory tower, there's some disagreement over whether MPS is good enough to look at versus looking at net balance, being MPS minus MPB, muscle protein breakdown. And that other little wrinkle, whether we need to look at whole body protein balance versus just muscle protein balance. So there's a little bit of gray area over there, but that's all at the second tier level of importance. We're arguing over what's of secondary importance. What is a lot less, where there's a lot less dispute, is how much total protein in the course of the day do we need to consume to maximize muscle growth. And depending on the population, depending on the situation, depending on the energetic balance, it ranges somewhere on the low end of 1.6-ish grams per kilo to the high end of about 2.2 grams per kilo. And then you have observational data in competitors where you can see as high as 2.6 to 3.5 grams per kilogram of body weight working well in competitive situations.
Yeah. I think it's easy to miss the forest for the trees, focusing on reductive pathways and understanding biochemistry and how it works. I mean, one thing regarding to this topic as well is our bodies are not an on and off switch, and our bodies will utilize and prioritize protein where it needs it first. If you look at like other factors, stress, sleep, inflammation, all that stuff, like you said, gut, your gut microbiome and all these things, that it's just such a vast, complex topic to delve into. And if you look at the research and how sometimes, you also, a lot of people misinterpret the research. And, I think Lyle McDonald also had quite a big debate. I think it was with Thorne, and it was like a whole hot subject. And, sometimes it's just best just to be on the outskirts and just let them hot fire. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things to delve into. But if you delve too much into it, you can also get caught into the web.
Yeah, some of the most heated arguments and some of the most vicious fights are over the things are over the icing instead of the icing.
Sometimes it's irrelevant. It's like sometimes you're just wasting your time arguing over nothing, really.
Yeah, Lyle is an interesting guy, man. Interesting character, highly influential and highly entertaining throughout the decades. So,
yeah, Lyle.
I'm gonna put the cover of the book just on screen for a second.
Yeah, this is Alan's new book. That
there it is.
Good on protein. lovely cover. I really enjoyed it.
It's a great book.
You competitors know I pressed my freaking tricep into my lat for that shit. So
somebody call a plumber because those pipes are going to burst.
All you need is overhead lighting and a pump, my friend.
Alan's got them guns.
Where can people get this book?
Where can they order the book from?
Just you can go straight to my website, and that's alanaragon.com. And if you want to go straight to the book, it would be alanaragon.com/books. But if you go to the website, there'll be a link for you to click on the side there.
We'll post it on the page anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And then we were really fascinated by the latest paper that you guys published together about Peak Week.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Can we chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, man. That was with God. Guillermo. I always get
Guillermo. He's funny, and Shane, Dr. Scott Stevenson. He's a cool dude. He's intelligent. I actually chatted with him the other day.
Oh yeah, really cool guys, man. Really cool dudes. Scott. We had Brad on there. We had Chris Barakat on there.
Trying to read.
It was a monster.
Your Scott's books are crazy.
You know what's difficult to read.
Scott has too much brains for his own good, man. He's got too much. He's got too much in there.
I emailed him and I said, dude, I don't know how to interpret this book.
Yeah.
Did he give you a satisfactory explanation?
Forward to train.
I loved it.
He just made me more confused. So I was very much a beginner then. So I didn't understand all these big words like hypertrophy and.
No, it's really amazing. I've actually done a seminar with Scott. And Scott is a really unique and incredible guy. His knowledge goes way beyond just bodybuilding and stuff. He actually has had shaman training, like a literal freaking shaman. Wow. He's got that. He's done some weird stuff, man. but he's an awesome dude. They're all great guys. Chris Barakat is hilarious.
Oh, Chris, he's cool.
Dude, I always mess up his last name. When I cite his work, I always say Baccarat instead of Barakat. And I'm thinking in my mind of Burt Baccarat from back in the day. What the world needs now. And so I always like freaking tease him about that, and sometimes I purposely misspell his name. It's a great group of guys. That paper, bro, it took us a year. I mean, we started writing it December of almost a year. We started writing it December of 2020, and freaking monster of a paper. It was rejected initially from the first journal we submitted it to, because apparently the editors of that journal didn't think it was an important enough paper. They weren't brotacular enough, And we're like, guys, you're dropping the ball here. This is a gem of a paper. And so, all right. And the routine of submitting papers to journals, when you get your paper rejected, you feel like crap for a solid week. You feel like, your ego is crushed, and then you just submit it to the next journal. So we went on down the line. We got it past peer review, and they gave us free reign to make that thing as long as we wanted to, because a lot of times the journals will cut off their word limit at 4,000 or 6,000 words, but they're like, okay, we'll freaking publish this thing that's like a chapter, basically. And it was pretty cool. I mean, we're all proud of that paper. And when we finished it and got it published, it was almost like, I don't know, like reaching the top of Mount Everest or something, because it took such a long time to put together.
it's such an important time for a bodybuilder, that last little bit. And I think, when you start on this journey of bodybuilding, you feel like this is kind of the make or break. Everything can change, but in reality, it's a really small part of the journey. Like, it's like,
yeah, but it's such a massive topic because there's so many variables and so many people are doing this thing and another one's doing that thing. So to have some clarification on what exactly is going on there, it's really good.
Yeah, and we hopefully we emphasized it enough in our paper that the example we're giving is one example that we've observed to work, but there are many roads to Rome as far as the peak week procedure goes. The model that we presented was one of the classical models with a depletion phase, a carb up phase, and a dry out, that little dry out at the end. So nowadays, the dry out part is people are scared of it and they just cut it out, especially in the natty community. Like, what? Dry out, deplete me more, make me look more like a swimmer? Damn, So they're scared of the dry out thing. But I think that the boys did an amazing job putting the paper together and looking at the evidence and truly, like I was like the Gary Taubes of the team writing the paper. I'm just reporting this shit, Well, I'm the evidence-based version of Gary Taub because these guys have massive competitive experience. All the rest of them, and so I think they did a good job of tying the academic literature to the recommendations, and of course, we emphasize that there's this big gray area that you have to do a dry run trial minimum of 2 weeks beforehand. It's hard for people to be in and dialed at 4 or 6 weeks where you can try a peak week thing. Yeah. But you don't really want to mess with the whole peak week manipulations unless you do a dress rehearsal of it. And there's a big controversy over whether people should even do peak week manipulations if they've come in and done their homework and are lean enough, and they can just essentially rely on the pre-stage pump to get the look they want. Yeah. Versus doing peak week manipulations. And there's even more controversy about whether people should manipulate more than just carbohydrate, and whether they should manipulate more than just carbohydrate and water. And there's even more controversy about manipulating sodium and potassium, and even adding more wrinkles to the equation and more potential ways to screw things up. In the natty community, they take a very minimalist approach. A lot of the readers of our paper took a look at that and sort of freaked out at the idea of not just gently ramping up carbs in kind of a linear way in the final days or the final week. But the paper is controversial in that aspect that everybody's peak week strategy should be individualized, and it's very hard to issue this universal, okay, this is what you do. And what we didn't want people to do is read our peak week paper and conclude that, okay, this is what Alan and Brad and Guillermo and Chris and Scott, this is what they're saying everybody has to do. We're not saying that. That's just an example of what you can do. And this can be different for different divisions of physique competition, like for bikini versus bodybuilding versus, figure, physique. People have different peaking methods for that because the judges are looking for different looks for all of those things. Absolutely. And so it's a messy topic, man.
Yeah, like anything in nutrition, context matters, and it's never black or white. It's when it comes to peak week, definitely great. There's a lot of gray area and how you manipulate. But for me, it's keeping it simple. The less you touch things, and if you've got your clients ready 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks before the show, it's just smooth sales before then, and just finer adjustments if need be. And like you said, again, it's all dependent on the individual goal and what show they're aiming for. Because like you said, every show presents forth a different look, a different physique. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like the whole concept of getting the muscles as full as possible with as much glycogen as possible and as minimal subcutaneous water as possible. Then you got the little wrinkle of loading it up with intramuscular triglycerides, trying to not interfere the carb loading with the fat loading.
Yeah.
I mean, we really kind of nitpicked and touched upon a bunch of theoretical stuff as well. I wanted the boys to say, okay, you can do what the bro community calls a massive shit load the night before. Everybody knows about shit loading, right? But we couldn't say that in the paper. Probably wouldn't get it accepted.
Well, I remember a couple of times when, I've gone away from the competitive fear, the competitive arena with coaching clients. Like when guys want to compete or females, I just hand them over to Andrew or Craig or Steph. I just more into wellness, Gen Pop now. But I remember a couple of times I did some fat loading protocols with some old guys, and I'll tell you something. When I use those protocols, it was just simple stuff, but they look so much better, But it's just, again, it just depends on the individual and how you apply it,
Yeah, for sure. And if you talk to 10 different coaches, they'll have 10 different methods of helping athletes peak. But it's the sort of the common threads between or among the different methods that are most important to look at.
I've got a question quickly. Can I jump in?
You jump in.
So in that last stage, when a person is already so insulin sensitive because they have been on a diet for so long, why would one want to do a depletion? Is it for a hypercompensation state of carbohydrates? Why would one do that before starting to carb up?
It really just OCD and risk taking. Yeah. That's why they do it. It's trying to get the extra 5% increase in circumference from the supercompensation of glycogen and water, basically, and rolling the dice and taking that chance. I've talked to coaches and back in the day, I actually did prep competitors. I'm like, why are you hiring me to do this? They're just, please help me. I'm like, okay. There's very honestly, like the visual difference between someone who does peak week and someone who doesn't peak week can almost come down to the stage lighting, it's that small of a difference. But at the highest levels of competition, people really are trying to eke out that last 1% of improvement that they could possibly do, just a little bit drier, just a little bit fuller. And it's a roll of the dice, man. Unless you got folks like yourself who are able to see patterns in your competitors with how you prep them outside of peak week and what peak week strategy works best for your methods. I think that it's important to have that established, and then you can always help folks do well.
Every single client that I peak, I don't think I've got two of the same peak programs for anybody. A perfect example, going back to that reverse dieting we were talking and avoiding. I use reverse dieting, or I did once with a client, one of my American clients, and we actually did really well at the Lee Haney Classic. I started reverse dieting out about 4 weeks before the comp. And I would add 5 or 10 grams of carbs, and I would do it with wine gums. It was just an easy way of, being accurate. And every week, I'd up it by 20 or 30 grams of carbohydrates as we led into the competition. My theory there was just to build up the enzymes to process the carbohydrates that were coming for the peak week, and then just manage the peak week from there. And I was just trying to release the stress because he was ready 4 weeks out. So I was just trying to release the stress on the body and peak it in. It was just a total different way of doing it. We actually start reverse dieting into the comp.
Peak month.
Yeah.
Peak month was it? But it worked out really well.
There's another
That's a new model, a new paradigm that
there we go, another paper coming in.
We'd worked together for about 6 years, so I knew his body quite well. So for me, it was a very calculated risk, and I knew it wouldn't have a negative effect. Well, I hoped it didn't, and it didn't, thankfully.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and you hear interesting anecdotes from pros at the high level too. And a memorable one is Kevin Lavrone's anecdotes of growing into the contest.
I
Of course,
Yeah.
he took like 6 months off between the contests, so of course he's.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fluxing up, and just kind of getting that going sort of in reverse for a month towards the show. That's interesting stuff, man. That is that's a great ebook, I think.
No, I mean, literally talking about Kevin. I mean, that guy probably for me to date had probably has one of the best physiques ever to grace the stage. I mean, symmetrically, it was just for me flawless. It was just unreal to see him on that stage.
His
And
genetics.
literally, that guy could do everything wrong. He could do everything wrong. I mean, when I was at the Olympia in 2013, I shared a room with him in Vegas, with Liz Gaspari and Rich. When Liz was separated with Rich and we went to the Olympia, that was when he had bought out, I think it was some nutrition company before he had his Livroni. And we were just talking. He said, man, I literally did everything away from what the book said. And I just looked like I looked. Just imagine if he did everything 100% dialed in, how better he would have looked, you know?
Well, he was a big Arnold fan too, so
Yeah.
he would well, Kevin, he was contrarian with a lot of stuff. Like a lot of people, like during the time when everybody was doing the Mike Menser thing and training a body part once a week, hitting it with, that once. He was training body parts 3 times a week. When everybody was depleting water to like 1-2 days out, he was just overloading the water. So he was a contrarian with a lot of stuff, and it worked great for him, man. He did the whole thing with hitting the bar before getting on stage as well. He swore by that method of the pre-stage alcohol intake as well. So, but that may have been more of like a psychological advantage to have a buzz up there on stage versus not, so.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe it's for the nerves.
Andrew's got a question from, I think you can see it from one of our Facebook.
Can I put it on there?
Yeah, we can put it. Andrew, we can put it on there.
Oh, yeah. So she says, when it comes to protein absorption, what would be the average actual amount absorbed from, say, a 40-gram serving? Would 25 to 35 gram range be a viable thought?
Yeah. In younger subjects, about 40 grams would go to muscle protein synthesis. So it all gets absorbed. It all gets digested and absorbed.
Yeah.
But what maximizes muscle protein synthesis is where the limits are. So when you consume protein, depending on the demands of the body at the time, some of it's going to go to muscle protein synthesis. Some of it's going to get oxidized. A small amount may even get oxidized, and a lot of it gets taken up by the gut, by the visceral tissues in the gut. And so what goes towards building muscle is usually a smaller fraction than people would hope for the protein dose. But per the McNaughton and colleagues data that we've gotten within the past few years, 40 grams of protein can outperform 20 grams for muscle protein synthesis in younger subjects, where we formerly thought the cutoff was like 20 to 25. And now in older subjects, we've got this dilemma of, okay, where is the max? Since 70 grams outperformed 35 grams for maximizing muscle protein synthesis. So just to answer your question more directly, I think we're looking at younger subjects maxing out MPS, at least in the 40 gram doses, and older subjects maxing it out, who knows, maybe towards 50, 60, who knows, maybe not 70, but yeah, certainly somewhere between 40 to 50, 60 grams of protein may max out muscle protein synthesis, depending on the age of the population and depending on the context. So, that's that's the unfortunately complicated answer to that question.
I think
also the problem, Alan, is the problem with these studies is they're looking at protein uptake in skeletal muscle, which is the issue, which only represents about 50% of the protein needs and protein incorporation from food that goes into your body. And then secondly, it also doesn't necessarily look at muscle protein breakdown. and also not everything digests that quickly. So to worry about the permanent limit, all you can, of what foods digest more slowly, and that, like you said, intake, it can be like, much as like 10 to 15 grams per hour that can pass through the digestive tract, and then to other tissues and stuff like that. So again, it's a thing a lot when they look at it from where the studies have been derived from, they misrepresent the research, and that's where I think a lot of people get confused as well.
I think people get confused between whole body, protein turnover and muscle protein turnover. Like, it seems to be like all your protein its only role in your body is for muscle protein synthesis, but forget that it plays a large role in your immune system and many other facets in your body. So
there's more to living tissue than just skeletal muscle.
So when somebody says, well, 40 grams is the max that you can absorb, or for muscle protein synthesis, as you say, there's a whole lot of other things that you need protein for, that it's being used for at the same time. I know we lose like, 60, 70, 80% to the gut already, just repairing the gut lining.
And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Wolf and colleagues would say that the proteins taken up by the gut would be able to provide amino acids during times of demand for the muscle. So that's their hypothesis anyway. And so, it is potentially looking at the smaller picture. If we just look at protein synthesis at the muscle level without considering muscle protein breakdown and without considering whole body protein turnover. So good point once again.
Is there a question?
No, I'm done. At the moment? Andrew needs to go now to his new meeting.
But don't end it on my behalf. I mean, if you guys want to carry on, I can go. You can carry on if you want to, if you need to.
Did you guys want to speak to Alan about some of our hypertrophy research?
There's a lot of stuff that we want to speak to Alan, but we don't know how long we can stay.
Yes, we could have Alan here for hours and hours. I could. I mean, just chatting to him, just lingering along, and just touching up on things we both love and passionate about, and just having him on and just shedding light is just unreal. Especially when you've been involved in the actual research yourself. Publishing those studies. It's just something so it's awesome to.
Alan, can you maybe talk us through the peak week paper again? The recommendations around hydration and drying out and water loading and that kind of stuff. What did you guys suggest, and why did you suggest that?
Well, we kind of backed off of everything except for carbohydrate and protein manipulation. Water, we touched upon that a little bit, but we purposely sort of we did. There is a table in there that looks at sodium and potassium, etc. But we've made this big warning that, hey, this is hypothetical. This is icing on the cake, and you better do a dress rehearsal of these sort of things. But our paper mainly focused on the macronutrient manipulation of the peak week, and it was so 7 days out, you've got a depletion period, a 3-day depletion period, where carbohydrate is low and fat has the option of being high to compensate for the calorie drop. So carbohydrate would be at roughly ketogenic levels, 30 to 50-ish grams, or you can look at it as about half a gram per kilo. And then during that time period, fat would be upped to compensate for the low calories. You could bring fat up to 2 grams per kilo. And then after those 3 days of depletion, where you're training to basically deplete intramuscular substrate stores of essentially everything, then during the glycogen loading phase, or during the carbohydrate loading phase, then carbohydrate would be anywhere from 4 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight, whereas it was down to like half a gram to a full gram per kilo of body weight during the depletion phase. And so with that high amount of carbohydrate intake, where it would be pretty typical, 5-6 grams per kilogram of body weight. There, a lot of competitors experience this nasty sort of gastrointestinal upset if protein is still kept high at like the 2s and the 3s in terms of grams per kilogram of body weight. So during the carb loading phase, which is 2 days, we bring the protein down. Try to keep a minimum of 1.6 grams of protein, but essentially cut protein almost in half of the typical during the carbohydrate phase, just so you can get those carbs in. And then with that final day out, that in quotes the drying out phase, you have the option of either keeping water stable throughout that thing, or you have the option of dropping it down. And the drying out phase would essentially be almost a repeat of the depletion phase as far as the macronutrients go. And the hope essentially be almost the hope of the dry out phase. I heard myself echoing there, and so I stopped talking. So because I thought you guys were talking.
Gone. I'm just going to interrupt you quickly before you carry on that thought. Yep. Andrew just needs to leave to go to another meeting. Okay. So I'm going to be moving from the chat quickly.
Nice.
Okay. Cheers, Andrew.
Catch you later.
Bye, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great meeting you, dude. Say hello to Dave Tate for me, please.
Andrew, we'll chat later.
Cheers, thanks, guys.
Cheers, my man.
Cheers, buddy.
Okay, we off. We are live. Carry on. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So yeah, I was just on the
water.
Oh, no problem. I was just on the final little bit of the dry out day. The controversial dry out day, where the hope and the attempt would be to maximize the dryness, minimize subcutaneous water, and really that is just kind of a crapshoot, and the differences would be minimal, but hopefully they would be enough to maybe make a difference in a placing or two. Yeah. And so that's kind of the framework of the peak week model. And the rest is really just hypotheticals and putting together circumstantial bits and pieces of the evidence to justify us doing this or that with this or that nutrient.
Yeah. It's very interesting because obviously and not shooting down anyone's methods or anything, but you would often come across people who do 10 liters of water leading up to the show and then suddenly absolutely nothing. And they will do a dry out phase for 2 or 3 or 4 days. And like, it's always shocking to me. Like you just I don't think they understand the physiology very well. Like they don't understand how quickly you would compensate. Your body would like a homeostasis. Absolutely. So,
but most of the time they're forcing it with pharmacology though.
Yeah.
And overriding the body's natural tendency to seek homeostasis through powerful diuretics, through Lasix and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you understand how, like you said, physiology and biochemistry, how nutrients are actively transported, through, intestinal cells, enterocytes and all that stuff, how body pulls salt, sugar, amino acids, into the lining and, exchanges compounds, if we're talking hydrogen, ions and all that stuff, and we get into the nitty gritty, exchanges of amino acids and all that stuff, when I just think people, if you have no basic understanding of some physiology and biochemistry, you can make a lot of excuse my French, but stuff ups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And that's what made the article fun to write, because we know that everybody has a different take on the peak week procedure, and we know that the phenomenon is something that we're just literally trying to eke out the last fraction of results for the stage look. So we're happy with the paper. We're hoping that people got some ideas out of it, at least to put to practice.
Yeah. I mean, I think it vindicated a lot of what we do. So we read it and went like, okay, it's a lot of what we do anyway. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you something that you might not want to answer. What is the weirdest peak week stuff that you've ever heard?
Oh God. The weirdest peak week stuff I've ever heard was, sodium loading on the final 2 days, where folks are just socking down 10 grams or more of sodium on the final couple days, because they're coinciding the sodium intake with the carb up, and they're just really wanting to blow the muscles up as full as possible. And so end up looking real puffy, and the thing is, it's very difficult to manipulate where subcutaneous versus intramuscular water goes. It's very difficult too. So if people don't do their homework and they don't come in as lean as hell, all of these manipulations they just stand to hurt people more than they help them.
I totally agree. If you lean and ready a week before, you literally don't need to touch much.
You don't need to touch much. You get a good pump pre-stage,
That's it. Have a glass of wine and you're good to go.
Right.
And it's so quickly for aldosterone and stuff to just re-regulate. So it's just, you can't really make such a big difference as much as you think you can.
Yep.
No, for me, the biggest protocol that I've achieved, a lot of my clients over the years have achieved such like hard, good conditioning, is literally just taking all the stress away from the body and just manipulating small little things, tweaks in the diet. Like sometimes don't even change, just go with the flow. When you actually get into that sort of parasympathetic state, doing things like yoga, calming your body, managing your stress better, your body just like responds so much better. Because you must remember all those adaptations to all those stresses, diet, training, psychological, mental, that's just going to make you look worse, man. And when you just bring that down going into the show, like sometimes that's also a protocol I've used in the past, Craig, where you actually reverse dieting, you're taking away that stress from the diet, and training, you're taking away from that cardio. The body's just like, wow, I'm not in that stress state. You actually appear to look so much better. And like you actually get that cool looking, because the body's it's in that homeostasis now. It's not in that fight or fight survival mode,
Well, that was my theory, was just to reduce stress on your system overall over those preceding weeks, and then build up the necessary enzymes to handle the carb and process it and a proper nutrient partitioning from 16, 18 weeks of a hard prep. And because he was in such good condition, I was willing to risk it, and we discussed it, and we thought, okay, well, let's try and see what happens. And it led into a really smooth peak week. Whether it would have led him, whether he would have had a really good peak week or not, I don't know. But it was a great experience. It came off quite well. And he was still in a deficit. Adding 20 or 30 grams doesn't wipe out that 700-800 calorie deficit we had in place anyway. But it does slowly ease that stress off. But my main goal was actually just reproducing those enzymes in the gut itself, that when I did process or did go into my peak week, that he had the best use of those carbohydrates and nutrients.
Because
that's a great approach.
Not just going from somebody who's on keto and then slamming them with 700 grams of carbs. It's not really a bright idea.
Essentially, you come with a person who has been sitting on 100 grams of carbs for months, and then suddenly you give them 3 kilos of potatoes. They just can't handle it. So that it is a good approach, and I've used it as well, and it does definitely work quite well.
The whole thing of sharding on stage is not a good. It's not a good thing.
No.
There's a question.
More a statement.
Yeah, it is. Like we just spoke about it.
Yeah.
When a person's stress, when your stress is low,
it's the best he's looked.
Looks better.
We actually touched upon that in the paper. If you guys,
did you?
I
actually haven't delved into the paper. I'll read it a bit later. It's in my go-to.
Man, that paper is so long. Like if you have a tough time falling asleep, just break that paper out, man.
I just go to Aragon's research review. I've been doing it since 2010. It just simplifies it. I need to go into all these papers. You cut all that hard work for me out, Alan. You've done it for the past 10 years.
Appreciate that, man.
It's worth every cent.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Subscriber for life, man. 10 years and going strong.
Thank you.
Cool. Alan, it was so fantastic to have you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and your knowledge.
Yeah.
We're just going to end the live broadcast, but you can still chat to us behind the scenes.
And we are going to put up Alan's website in the comments. Please go and buy the book, and please go and subscribe to the research review if you are a coach or
or if you're a nerd like us, but specifically if you're a coach, have any interest in the human body, and would like to see what the body of evidence says and not cherry-picked studies like certain things.
Just get Gary Taubes on. He'll great at cherry picking.
Optometrists on social media pushing, I don't know, 1 meal a day. Yeah.
It's really cool to talk to folks who deal with athletic populations, and it's just a whole different world, you know. With more of the general pop, you get questions of what do you think of intermittent fasting, and you know, how long should my feeding window be if I want to increase autophagy, and you know, funny questions. It's like
Dr. Fun. Jeez.
A lot of it is like, bro, it doesn't matter. When should I stop eating? What time of night should I stop eating if I want to be able to live to 150? I'm like, dude, don't want you. Trust me, you probably don't want to live. You probably don't want to live to 150, man. so no, it is. But those topics are very interesting too. So you know, there's a lot to talk about, man. A lot to talk about. I have a paper in going through peer review.
Oh, really?
Oh, is it?
Pardon?
I'm just going to end the broadcast now. And just
this paper.
When's it coming out?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Guys, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We're going to go.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, A. Thanks, guys.